56. Ammonites navicularis. Tablet 22, Figure 5. Elliptical? Umbiculate. Volutions narrow, compressed, deeply inserted, rapidly enlarging. Ambit convex, very broad. Transversely costated, costae numerous, smooth, rounded. The specimen figured is the only known example of this species, and this is unfortunately imperfect. It is, however, remarkably characterized by its navicular form, the width of the ambit, large rounded costae, and sudden increase of the outer volution. The ribs are perfectly smooth and so numerous as almost to expand into each other. With but few exceptions, they extend entirely across the ambit, forming a tuberculated margin on each side the wreaths. The form of the septa, aperture, and umbiculus is unknown. The drawing is diminished to 1/2 the size of the original. Locality: Upper Chalk, Offham. 57. Ammonites catinus. Tablet 22, Figure 10. Depressed, volutions exposed, quadrangular, disc concave, expanded, ambit broad, oblique, a row of large obtuse tubercles on the outer margin. The volutions are 3 in number, almost entirely exposed, their outer margin elevated, and crested with a row of large nodular projections. The ambit is broad and smooth, inclined outwards, forming an obtuse angle with the inner surface of the volutions. The septa are numerous. It is probable that this is the species described by Mr. Parkinson as being of a large size, with nodular projections on the sides towards the back, which is generally flat. Geological Transactions, Volume 1, page 552. The specimen is nearly 3½ times the size of the figure. Locality: Lower Chalk, near Lewis. 58. Ammonites rusticus. Mineral Conchology, Tablet 177. Depressed, volutions few, gibbous, exposed, with a row of conical tubercles on each side and 2 rows on the back. Aperture wider than long. The whorls seldom exceed 3 in number. The bases of the larger tubercles almost touch each other and expand nearly across the volutions. The back is broad and rather flat. The tubercles upon it are numerous and but little elevated. The inner side of the aperture is concave. This species is of frequent occurrence in the lower chalk at Sotherham, but the specimens are very imperfect. The fossil figured and described by Mr. Sowerby is more distinct than any that have been found in Sussex. This ammonite corresponds in some particulars with A. catinus, but is distinguished by the 2 dorsal rows of tubercles and the gibbous form of the volutions. Locality: Lower Chalk, near Lewis. 59. Ammonites lewisiensis. Tablet 22, Figure 2. Depressed, umbiculus minute. Volutions wide, flat, almost entirely concealed. The external whorl equal to 4/7 of the diameter of the shell. Carene very narrow, rounded, aperture acutely sagittate. This ammonite may be readily distinguished in a suite of specimens, although its characters are rather of a negative description. In its general form, it resembles A. complanatus, gray marl fossils, number 34, but the umbiculus is larger, the carene less acute, and the surface exhibits no traces of striae or plicae. Its longest diameter is commonly about 14 inches, width of the outer volution 9 inches, greatest thickness 5 inches. At the external edge, 1 inch and a half. The volutions are but few, and with the exception of 4 or 5 obscure, transverse, radiating ridges, are perfectly even. The greatest thickness is at the inner margin, from whence the reeds gradually taper to the keel. The outer volution increases rapidly, and is nearly equal to half the diameter of the shell. In the specimen figured, which is nearly 1 foot and a half in diameter, the volutions appear to be wholly inserted, but probably in more perfect examples their inner margin is exposed. The septa are sinuous and very numerous, and the surface of the specimens is generally covered with thin, foliaceous impressions, which closely resemble those of the ammonite articulae figured by Faujas Saint-Fond. Plate 31, Histoire naturelle de Saint-Pierre. Locality, Lower Chalk, near Lewis. 60. Ammonites paramplus. Discoidal, subumbiculate. Volutions subcylindrical, nearly half-inserted. A row of indistinct, distant, oblong eminences on the inner margin. Aperture transversely obovate. This is a very large species, frequently exceeding 2 feet in diameter. It is seldom found entire. The longest diameter of a specimen in my possession is 24 inches. Shortest diameter 18 inches. Circumference of the outer volution at the aperture 23 inches. Diameter of the umbiculus 7 inches. Depth of the same 3.5 inches. The volutions are 4 or 5, almost half concealed, and in all probability were originally cylindrical, but are now laterally compressed. The aperture has its inner edge indented by the preceding whorl. The back is smooth. The protuberances are indistinct and wholly wanting in some examples. This and the species last described are the largest ammonites of the chalk formation. Both are nearly destitute of ornament, yet their forms are so dissimilar that even fragments can be distinguished with facility, those of A. lewiscensis being flat and thin in proportion to their magnitude, while the remains of A. paramplus are convex and almost cylindrical. Localities, Upper Chalk, near Lewis, and Eastbourne. 61. Belemnite something. Tablet 16, Figure 1. This figure represents the only species of belemnite that occurs in the upper and lower chalk of Sussex. It is smooth, cylindrical, and, unlike most of the genus, has no external sulcus. Longitudinal sections show that a small tube extends from the alveolus to the apex of the spathos part. Localities, Brighton and Lewis. 62. Scaphites striatus, gray marl fossils, number 35. This species has been discovered in the lower chalk at Brighton. 63. Hamites alternatus, gray marl fossils, number 39. The existence of hamites in the upper chalk has not previously been noticed. 2 decided examples of the present species have been found near Lewis. 64. Pectin quinquecostata. Tablet 26, figures 14, 19, 20. Subtriangular, slightly oblique, longitudinally costated, transversely striated. Lower valve gibbous, beaked, pentangular. Upper valve flat, front pentacuate. Sides forming an acute angle, margin crenulated, ears small. The length of this shell exceeds its width. It is slightly oblique, and the surface is covered by numerous diverging ribs and furrows, decussated by fine transverse striae. The lines of growth are deep and frequent. The lower valve is convex, beaked, and of a pentangular form. A large costa is placed on each angle, and 4 lesser ones on each of the intervening spaces. The beak is produced and incurved. The upper valve is flat, rather depressed, and marked with diverging costae and sulci, corresponding in number with those of the lower valve. The hinge line is straight. The sides diverge from the beak towards the front, the margin of which is pentangular and arcuate. Tablet 26, figure 20. A perfect specimen of both valves. Tablet 26, figure 19. Inner surface of the upper valve. Tablet 26, figure 14. A view of the back of the lower valve. Localities: upper and lower chalk, near Lewis and Brighton. It also occurs in the ferruginous sand of Rackham Common. 65. Pecten nitida. Tablet 26, figures 4, 9, 1. Obovate, rather oblique, longitudinally striated, striae numerous, radiating, upper valve flat, lower valve slightly convex. A remarkably neat shell, much depressed and rather oblique. The upper valve is perfectly flat, the lower one slightly convex. The striae are prominent and regular, radiating from the hinge line to the margin. About 50 on each valve. These are crossed by fine lines, which are scarcely visible to the naked eye. The margin is slightly crenulated, the ears are small and placed obliquely. The lines of increase few and indistinct, the length and width of the shell nearly equal. Tablet 26, figure 4, the inner surface of the lower valve. And figure 9, the external surface of the flat valve. Part of the lower shell is also seen, the upper valve being somewhat displaced. Tablet 26, figure 1, represents the inner surface of a pecten, bearing considerable resemblance to the present species. Where portions of the shell have been removed, the impressions of the outer surface remaining upon the chalk indicate the existence of striae like those of P. nitida. The margin is, however, perfectly smooth, the hinge line straight, and the length of the shell exceeds its width, in a greater proportion than in the present species. Localities: upper chalk, near Lewis and Brighton. 66. Pecten something. Tablet 25, figure 14. The specimen here figured is in too mutilated a state to admit of specific distinction. but as a rare production of the chalk it is worthy of notice. It is a thin, delicate, slightly convex shell, of a suborbicular form, marked with gentle undulating grooves or furrows. The margin is entire and smooth. No transverse striae are perceptible, but the lines of increase are strongly marked. The figure is reduced 1/3. Locality, Upper Chalk, near Lewis. 67. Pecten something. Tablet 25, Figure 6. The cast of a small pecten, its surface marked with 11 radiating costae. The imperfect state of this fossil prevents the determination of its species. Locality, Upper Chalk, near Lewis. '68. Plagiostoma spinosa. Tablet 26, Figure 10. Obovate inequivalve, longitudinally furrowed, the flatter valve armed with spines. Sides nearly equal, beaks incurved, approximate, ears small, even, margin denticulated. This fossil is remarkably distinguished from the other shells of the chalk by the long, slender spines attached to the upper valve. Each valve has from 25 to 30 rounded costae, formed by intervening furrows that radiate from the beaks to the margin. These are decussated by fine transverse striae and the lines of increase. The inner surface of the shell is also marked with corresponding impressions. The lower valve is most convex and has the line of the hinge straight. The upper valve is spinous, rather depressed, and contains the angular sinus, by which the shells of this genus are characterized. The spines arise from the ribs, but without any regularity, except that they are more numerous at the sides than in the center. They vary from 15 to 20 in number, and are from 1/2 inch to 2.5 inches in length. Each spine has a groove on the under and a corresponding ridge on the upper surface. They generally project from the shell, but in some instances lie close on the surface. The beaks are convex and incurved, the ears small and even, the margin neatly denticulated. A specimen cleared from the chalk exhibited no muscular impression. There are several varieties of this species, of which the following are the most remarkable. Var A, with both valves gibbous and but few spines. Var B, valves depressed, spines numerous. Var C, valves gibbous, ribs regularly convex and even. Var D, valves gibbous, ribs channeled near the front. This shell is one of the most common productions of the upper chalk, but is less frequent in the lower beds. The hardness of the Sussex chalk renders it exceedingly difficult to clear the specimens without destroying the spines. Localities: the chalk quarries in every part of the South Downs. Siliceous casts of the interior of the shell occur among the flints on Plumpton Plain. 69. Plagiostoma brightonensis. Tablet 25, Figure 15. Obovate, depressed, longitudinally costated, posterior side eared, anterior side lunulate, concave, small, acuminated, Margin crenulated. The length of this species is 3 inches, greatest width 2.5 inches, thickness of the united valves 1 inch. The convexity of the valves is nearly equal. The costae are somewhat flattened and channeled towards the anterior margin. There are about 30 on each valve. The anterior depression is elongated and marked with longitudinal striae. The posterior side is short and eared. The lines of growth are very distinct. Locality: the specimen figured is from the upper chalk of Brighton.